Tell me your name again.
Jay.
Jay. J-A-Y? Is that like your actual name or it's short for something?
It's just what I go by.
Yeah, cool. My name's Austin. All right, Jay, so tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm Jay. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a first-year Justice Studies major here at ASU. And yeah.
Cool. How old are you?
I'm 19.
You're 19? All right, cool. And then you said you're on the board for Planned Parenthood? Could you
Yeah,
tell me more about that?
ASU has Planned Parenthood Generation Action chapter, which is basically a chapter of students who encourage safe sex practices on campus, but also just talk about reproductive justice at large, in which pornography falls into that category.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And I'm not asking this question as a gotcha. I genuinely get confused by this. But is Planned Parenthood an organization that generally is like pro-life or pro-choice?
I think as an organization at large, a lot of the work that they do has more to do with pro-choice. But I think that Planned Parenthood is any organization is made up of different people with varying opinions. And
Totally.
I think that they have a reach that extends way further than abortion. And so I personally don't like to label everyone as one thing.
Totally, yeah.
And you can absolutely support the efforts that they do, even if you are pro-life.
Yeah, got it. I just we hear Planned Parenthood all the time. I get confused with all these organizations.
Yeah, there's a lot of political rhetoric.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I talk about pornography. I ask the question, is porn cheating? And I make the assertion that if you're in a committed monogamous relationship with another person, you've said something like, I love you, only you, mind, body, and soul, till death do us part. That if you deviate from that agreement, whether it's using a person on a screen or otherwise, that would be going against the agreement and therefore cheating. So that's kind of where my position is, but I'd be interested to hearing what you think. Is pornography cheating?
I just want to clarify your framework. You said I love you, till death do us part. So are you insinuating marriage or just in like a...
I would say something like that, right? It doesn't have to be marriage, but some sort of committed relationship where there is an explicit commitment or agreement amongst the couple, right? You can have that commitment whether you're dating, engaged, married, but generally speaking, just to make it easier, in the West, we have vows, right, that would generally be in a marriage that says something like that, right? But it doesn't have to be that, right? But good question.
We've actually done this workshop before, talking about whether you would feel comfortable with your partner engaging in pornography. I think it depends. Me personally, I feel that there are a lot of harms to pornography, not just for your own mental state, but also pornography as an industry contributes to sex trafficking and child abuse. And as a victim of child molestation myself, it's something that I take a firm stance against. But I do recognize that, unfortunately, pornography has become a very consistent tool that people use in exploring sexuality, exploring self-gratification, which I don't necessarily have qualms with those issues, but I do feel that pornography itself is... We can't have those things without having the other side of it. And I feel like those things are tied together. So I guess to take that and put it in the context of relationships, I personally, because of my spiritual beliefs, separate marriage and, I guess, casual relationships. I feel that marriage is a covenant that comes before God. And I feel that in that covenant, pornography would be a violation of not just the covenant itself, but purely, I feel that I can't perceive a situation where it could be used outside of a sexual, like that is what it is. It is, and it's to, well, for most people, it is to help them in their own sexual gratification. And that setup alone, in my eyes, violates what we're doing this thing for. In casual relationships, though, I feel like that's where I kind of become hands off, because there is no, I mean, you can say all day, oh, I see myself with you, but until you've actually made a real covenant, in my eyes, it's all up, it is what it is. And so I think there are people who are absolutely comfortable and have no qualms with their partner watching porn, and I feel that they have the right to feel that. In my own personal relationship, I would be more interested in why the person feels the need to watch pornography, because a lot of times what you'll find is people engage in porn not purely because of sexual gratification, but there's some underlying reasons and motivators that push people to pornography.
And there always is. Yeah, and that's why I say if you're in a committed monogamous relationship, right? If you made a covenant or some other agreement to only put your sexual energy, for lack of a better word, on the other person, then it would be cheating to go outside of that. But if you don't have that agreement, right? If you're just like, yeah, anything goes, okay, fine, I'm not going to try to convince somebody it's cheating.
Right.
Then the question goes, like you said, why? Why is the person watching it? So what are your spiritual beliefs?
So I feel that for the public, they would most identify me as Christian. I grew up Southern Baptist in Kojic, but I don't subscribe to most religious terms because I feel like religion and faith are two very different things. Religion refers to institutions that people created that have done a lot of craziness. And then I think faith is just that raw, real relationship with Christ. And so I do believe in Jesus Christ. I do believe in God. It's the source of everything that I do. So people might be like, oh, she's Christian. But I personally have qualms with church culture and a lot of things that maybe those same people might consider me not to be Christian because of.
Yeah, for sure. Totally get you. People ask me that all the time. Are you a Christian? I'm like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
I follow Jesus, but I'm not a Christian. Or I am a Christian if that's what we agree is the definition. So a wise man once said, if you even look at a woman with lustful intent, you've committed adultery with her in your heart. Have you heard that one before?
Yeah.
You know who said that? Jesus, right? So from the Christian worldview, it's fairly obvious, it's fairly self-evident that pornography would be cheating.
Absolutely.
However, the secular point of view really has no moral ground for that. In your experience, and you're very well spoken, by the way, why do you think that is? Why do you think that there is such a moral confusion with regard to pornography and sexuality outside of a worldview that explicitly, prescribes here's how we should be handling our sexual ethic?
I think it's no different than there being sex scenes in movies or, there being sexual innuendo in songs. I think, what's the term for it? Enculturation is the term. It's an international relations term that basically describes how we will come up with something, decide that, hey, this is what we do as a society, and then everybody just goes along with it.
Yeah.
I think that that's what sex has become. Even when we talk about sexuality and identification on the sexual spectrum, I am like, wait, so when did we start having national conversations about who has sex with who? In my eyes, that has just always been a private thing. I actually have no interest in who you have sex with. And so applying that same, framework to the conversation of pornography, I think sexual content has become taboo because of how much it is just ingrained in our media. And I do feel that in some sense, humans are sexual beings.
We definitely are.
But I think that from birth, we are programmed to identify with sex. And that's why more and more conversations of sexuality and of sexual preference extend younger and younger. And so I don't know that I would say that people have no moral ground, but I think that for most people, what they perceive to be okay is based off of what we allow in society. I don't think that there is enough individualism and critical thought into things like pornography, sexual content. Because I feel like if we are going to have an attack on pornography, we need to have an attack on sex in all forms of media. So yeah.
So many people just say it's normal. Porn's normal. It's certainly been normalized, but I would say it's not necessarily normal to spend your time alone masturbating while watching strangers have sex, though it's very common, right? It's common, not normal, in my opinion. So in your work educating through Planned Parenthood, how does pornography come up in what you guys are doing?
Well, we address anything in regards to sexuality. What I can say is I think it's important to teach and to talk about sex because it is something that happens. It is something that is a natural part of reproduction and just a natural part of life.
It's required for reproduction.
It is required.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to have those conversations about sex. I can say in my own experience, being a victim of sexual abuse, no one.
And by the way, you've said that twice now. I'm so sorry. I don't know your story, but
no.
Thank you for sharing that. It's terrible. It's far too common. And you wouldn't be able to say that as confidently as you are now if you haven't really done some work on that.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Good
I appreciate
for you.
That.
Yeah.
But yeah, I recognize in my own experience as a child needing to now, the deed has already been done. someone needs to talk to me
Yeah.
about what happened. And so I am not at all saying that sex should not be a part of the conversation at any point. I think what it actually is and what it actually should be is that what is the lens that we're teaching it from?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the people who are in control of teaching our children about sex are people we know nothing about. Our filmmakers and podcast owners, and we have no knowledge about these people's natural tendencies. Imagine finding out that the movie that your child was exposed to about sex was made by a pedophile.
Harvey Weinstein.
Like, how unsettling would that be for you? We know nothing about these people. And so in our work about sexuality, of course pornography comes up because, as I said before, it's a lot of people's introduction to what sex is. And I think it's a poor representation and a poor understanding of how sex actually works, especially on behalf of women. I don't even think it's like real. Like, if we were going to do it, at least make it kind of accurate.
Realistic. Yeah, well, it's not real intimacy. Real intimacy is done between two people.
Yeah.
Not between one person and a screen.
Mm-hmm.
That's not intimacy. That's fantasy land. So you're actually getting further away from actual real intimacy when you're engaging in pornography because it's synthetic.
Right.
It's not what it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, at least, an intimate relationship, sexually or otherwise, is between two people, two consenting adults,
mm-hmm.
right? Pornography perverts that, it distorts that, and it gets you further away from actually creating intimacy.
I actually just did a thesis on this topic about porn
Of course you
addiction.
did. Of course you did.
I did a thesis on this topic for my English class, and it was basically kind of making the argument that we can become addicted to anything
mm-hmm.
as humans. I feel that pornography is one of those things where you can't stay in the box, right? You might log on and be like, this is the type of content I like to watch. But enough of watching that, you become bored with it. Like,
mm-hmm.
you're going to want to expand and look at things that before you probably would have had no interest in, because it doesn't become exciting, it doesn't become gratifying if it is not new. Like, mm-hmm. we are trained to like enjoy new things and to explore. I think is a part of human nature. I think that's particularly dangerous with pornography because I don't think the spectrum is that wide, especially in the sense of there are people on these sites who are underage but marketed to be of age. There are things on these sites that have no type of bounds. There is bestiality, like there is everything on these sites. Mm-hmm. It starts with, I just like this. I just like this.
Porn
type
use
of
always
content.
escalates. It always escalates.
Always escalates. And I think that it doesn't say anything about the person specifically. I don't feel like anyone is like, when you first get on there, I don't think anyone, not anyone, but I think that most people don't have intentions of contributing to child abuse or contributing to sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. But I think being on there, you are subscribing yourself into a culture. Porn sites have rooms for comments. Like, these things are real, and you are now being like, hey, I'm a part of this community. And communities all come with social pressures. They all come with peer pressures. And before you know it, you into some stuff that you would have never been into mm-hmm. when you first got on the site. And so I think that we already deal with it enough with society at large, especially in college campuses. You never would have been interested in alcohol until you got here. Like, we already deal with that enough. I don't think that needs to be a space where we have to deal with it even more.
Yeah, for sure. Are you familiar with the book Takedown? Layla Mikalikowicz, I can't say her last name. She's the one who really is like pioneered the takedown of Pornhub in the United States, getting it banned. And there's a statistic in her book, it's either in her book or on a podcast I saw, but they studied Pornhub. 1 in 8 videos on the homepage, just on the homepage, 1 in 8 videos were people who are underage mm-hmm. or people who are being raped.
I believe it.
And these are the ones they could prove. It's like, without a shadow of a doubt, they proved, they talked to the people, these people were raped or underage.
I believe it.
So people are like, oh, it's so harmless. Yeah, I go to these sites. It's like, well, if you've engaged in pornography, at least on Pornhub and within the last handful of years, you probably have masturbated to watching a child mm-hmm. be raped. And if that doesn't make you think twice about it, I don't know what will, right? But then they can so easily excuse that. Oh, well, yeah, it doesn't matter how they got on the screen. Well, it does matter how they got on the screen.
It absolutely does.
Yeah, it fuels sex trafficking and all sorts of things. So porn use always escalates, we know that. And like you said, most of these people who have the FBI knocking on their door, which I do this for a living, I've talked to everybody, or they find themselves masturbating, while watching bestiality or something like that. It doesn't start there, but it gets there over time. And that's the way the brain works, is the prefrontal cortex, it gives this dopamine hit that is just unnatural, and you got to keep on escalating to more and more and more to where the consequence of your behavior doesn't even matter anymore. Yeah. You're just like, okay, I'm going to do this. So you said you're 19 years old. Are you currently dating somebody, or have you dated somebody recently?
Yeah, it's complicated, but I have.
Okay, I don't need to know the details of your relationship, but so statistically speaking, depending on what study I just pulled on up here, 87% of men between 18 and 22 have some sort of regular pornography use. Let me just ask you a question first, though. Would you prefer your partner be a regular pornography consumer or not in a relationship?
My preference would be not.
Would be not. Okay. So knowing the statistics about it, basically 9 in 10 have some sort of regular pornography consumption. As a very educated person, you're way more educated than most about this topic. How do you go about that?
I think it's complex, because on one hand, I feel like a lot of, and I'm faithful, so we're gonna go there. We're gonna go there. I feel like a lot of my walk and a lot of what God has called me to do is evangelism. And so I carry that with me. But also, I don't underestimate how individualized everyone's experience is. I think when that day comes, a lot of people are gonna be shocked as to who you see in heaven and who you don't. So I try not to cast any type of...
Oh, this guy got in? How'd that happen?
Right? Because we don't know. We are witnessing each other, but we truly don't know anyone's experience. And so I feel like the only thing that I can do is have very strong and communicated boundaries. Here is how I feel about it. I think that, and even in my current situation, I only have ever had one boyfriend. I'm young. But even there, he was also someone who is a man of God and is striving to become a true man of God. And so we've had those conversations and we've done that type of work, but I don't underestimate at all that will be a journey. There at some point it might happen.
Find me one man who's never struggled with lust, whose name is not Jesus,
and I don't
Jesus.
And that's not a bad thing. I think the thing that centers me on my faith the most is that it is actually set up. Like, Jesus died on the cross for you to always have the ability to come back. And so for me, it is never no shame. It is never casting any blame. It's just, hey, come home. Like, I don't care what you done and where you went, and trust. I have been on a path. I'm 19, but it's been a lot. I have no problem admitting that my abuser introduced me to pornography at a young age, that I struggled with pornography addiction at a young age. That is real. But there was space in my faith to come home and to be delivered from that. And so I think it's one of those things where you have to stand 10 toes down on your boundaries. I think a lot of times in efforts of love, you become more comfortable with things because you love that person and you want it to work out, and you have to stand 10 toes down on those boundaries. But then also, by you doing that, you don't know how much you could be influencing someone else to take that type of turn and to do that type of work in their own life. Yeah. So I don't obsess about what my partner's doing. All I do is put that prayer up and stay steadfast in what I'm doing.
Yeah, the most loving thing to do oftentimes is not the nicest thing.
Right.
It may be very kind, but it may not be nice. And to really stand for somebody for more possibility, more healing, restoration, it often means we have to speak the truth. Right. And if we're speaking the truth in love, even if it's unpopular, in my orientation towards life, that's a better way to be with people as opposed to shaming and condemning them.
Absolutely.
Do you mind if I ask you a question, not specifically, but about your past? How old were you when you were exposed to pornography?
I don't remember specifically. This is what the therapists like to call trauma-induced amnesia, which is where my brain's like, that was painful.
I don't want to remember that
one. I'm not
going to do it. Yep. Have you done work to try to bring those memories back, like EMDR or things like that?
So I actually just finished writing a book.
Oh my gosh.
Which will be released this summer. and it was hard. It was so difficult. I challenged myself to write everything that I remember about it.
Good for you.
And it's all
That's
details.
so hard.
It's never anything. I don't have a clear picture, but what I remember, I think, is intentional. And so I don't remember the exact age of being introduced to it, but I know that the things that I do remember about when like my parents recognized what was going on, I had to be like 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
Being exposed to pornography. And then we live in an age of tech. So I was 8 or 9 years old with an iPad, you know, and so I had all access and all ability.
Yeah. Yeah. How long did that go on for, using pornography?
I think I didn't really get true help, and I don't think it came to an end until I want to say, I remember having a breakdown my junior year of high school. I think I was 16, and I was like in there with my counselor, and it was just about how dirty I felt. Like it just like I felt like everyone perceived me to be this super intelligent, super, you know, good girl. And secretly, this was like my experience in my life, and I just remember wanting to be done. And I think that was the turning point.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it completely ended there, but I know at some point it just stopped being a part of my walk.
Yeah, there's a line in the sand where it's like that something changed there.
And it wasn't, and I think people sensationalize stuff like that. So I want to be clear, it was not, oh my God, I've had a reckoning, no more porn. It was like every day, no. I can't keep, no. Every day it's a no. This is not a part of my walk. No, I have victory over this. No, the enemy doesn't get to rule me here. It was every day. And then eventually it just became easier.
Yeah.
And then eventually it was like, hey, now go save someone else.
Well, the brain science suggests it's a 2 to 5 year process to rewire the brain back to normal after a pornography use or pornography addiction. You're right in that window,
Yeah.
right? I mean, my story as well. Every 6 months, I was like, I think I'm fine. But honest to God, like 3 to 5 years, I'm like, okay, finally, there's no more. There's no desire. There's no temptation to go back to pornography.
And oof,
Yeah.
just glory be to God for that, because I don't think anyone asked for this. Nobody asked for it. Like, even as like when you first are exposed to pornography, nobody
Yeah, no
asked.
10-year-old is like, hey, can I go watch a gangbang?
Yeah, it's like
No.
nobody asked for it, and then once you do it, it's on you, and then you have to spend so much energy fighting against something that you never knew was a threat. That's a lot, and so I don't blame people. That's a lot to carry. That's a lot to figure out. Plus the fact that, hey, you gotta eat. So like
You
now
still
you
gotta live
go
life.
work, like
Yep.
you know, and it's a lot. I don't negate that it's a lot, but I encourage people to do that work, because nobody asked for this, not a single one of us.
Yeah.
But it is going to be on us to decide whether we live with it or not. I just decided at an early age, nah, you can't stay with me.
Yeah.
I'll have to go.
Yeah. Good for you.
And
Good for you.
I'm a happier and more centered and full person because of it.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, love that. Yeah, usually, not always, usually there's some sort of trauma. What's up, guys? There's some sort of trauma that is either the catalyst or the reinforcing factor to why people turn to pornography, right? So it could be physical abuse, sexual abuse at a young age. For me, it was the death of my mother when I was 5 years old. She died in a plane crash, and so having that destabilization in my family, and I found pornography a few years later, what I've realized in my story is I'm not watching pornography because I just want to have an orgasm. I'm trying to answer the question of, does anybody love me? Did my mom love me? Did I have parents who loved me?
And when you've been abused, you felt like you didn't have control of your sexual experience. Someone else forced a sexual experience on you. Masturbation and pornography gives you the false idea that you're in control of what your body feels, because that inner child is still wishing for that autonomy back. And really it's just further taking your autonomy.
It rules over you.
But you're absolutely correct, and that's why, you know, and I said it earlier, I think it has less to do, I don't think anyone is just on that surface level of, oh, this feels good. I think it always has something to do with a moment, a memory, or an instance where we lost something or where we were looking to gain something.
Yeah, for sure. One of the tactics that I use and people use is carry a picture around of yourself as a child, and then look at that with compassion. two things can be true, right? I mean, we're responsible for our decisions. And when we look at the story of our life that made us make the decisions we made, we can have compassion for that child, whatever happened, traumatically as a kid, and then be able to love that inner child compassionately, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm such a terrible person, why did I do this, and having regret over it. All right, so what would you say to men around your age?
Okay.
Statistically, 9 out of 10 of them are addicted to porn. What would you say to them? And by the way, women are in that category too, but it's statistically less prevalent with women. That's why I say men.
Yeah.
But.
And this means a lot to me because I mostly have brothers. And, I love, and I grew up with my dad being a very present person in my life. And so I love the men around me. And I want to start there because I think it's important to start off with love and start off in that place. What I have noticed, though, growing up with boys, is that we talk a lot about sexism, which is real. And all of my major is justice. It's all about fighting, systemic oppression. But I think that there is a sexism that goes unnoticed for men. And I think, unfortunately, you guys are told at a very young age what being a man means. And specifically when it comes to sex, I think men and boys are over-sexualized so early. Like, I hate in media, and especially in like these like movies that people love, where they have young boys act out over sexual things, like staring at women or looking under dresses, and I'm like, why was that such a taboo thing, like in media? Like, what are we doing? That's like weird. Like I could imagine telling a child, hey, do this. Like, what? That's strange. Anyways, but yeah, I think that young boys are over-sexualized way too early, and it's a difference. The over-sexualization that girls experience is that your body is the thing being dehumanized, your worth is the thing being belittled. What we're doing to boys is the exact opposite in, hey, you're the dehumanizer. Like, you're the that's a whole different experience. Like, it's like for example, take slavery. It's one thing to be the slave, to be the dehumanized, and to be the one being abused. But imagine being the slave master. How morally you have to disengage yourself to be the one able to then dehumanize someone.
Yep.
There's a mirrored experience. There's pain on both sides, and that's what I feel is going on with boys, especially in America. We morally disengage them at a young age so that they may be able to continue the setup that we have all agreed that we enjoy. And so I guess what I would say to young boys is, you do not have to exist in the culture. The Bible says, do not be of this world, for a reason. You do not have to exist in the frameworks that they tell you must exist in. Hypersexuality is not a trait of masculinity. You get to decide what masculinity looks like. And so in the same vein that we teach young boys and young girls to explore and, try out different things, I would also encourage them to not believe everything that they think. You can explore in this end, but if it now behooves you to go explore the other end. If you're going to explore your sexuality in the sense of like engaging in pornography, then explore how you could also be a sexual being while not engaging in pornography. Take the time and due diligence to experience the duality of things, and don't accept the single story. So I would just encourage autonomy. Take back that control. That's for everybody.
Yeah, totally. Beautiful. All right, you said you wrote a book?
I'm writing.
You're writing a book.
Well, I just finished my first draft, so now.
What's it called? What's it about?
It's called Outwritten. And it's about how, while I was trying to figure out who I was and come up with my story, fear was also writing a story, and it was outwriting me. And so my fears and my traumas have basically controlled these past 19 years of my life. And you might be like, well, that's not a lot. Well, when you are a black girl and you're adultified at a young age because they perceive you to be more mature than you are, and then when you're also a victim of abuse, you're forced to grow up really fast.
Yeah.
And so even though I'm 19, my perception of things extends beyond what most 19-year-olds would be able to experience. And so Outwritten is basically my first time declaring war against those things, which I have been doing it in my personal life, but now it's on paper. And now it's real for me. And it's extremely raw. It's extremely exposing.
Totally. Put yourself out there like that.
But that fear of people seeing me, that fear of what people will think, it has kept me from producing anything.
Well,
And
what
as
you're
you
doing
can
is you're
see-
risking being loved.
Yeah.
We can only love people or be loved to the extent we're willing to show people what's really going on the inside. And that is risky as hell, and it's vulnerable. But it's very connecting as well.
And I think to take it a step forward, this will be my first time loving all of me out loud. Like, all of it.
Yeah.
The stuff I didn't want people to see. The part of I'm like, no, because this will make them forget it.
Put it out there.
Forget it.
Yeah.
Like, and I can't wait for not only the freedom, because it's already given me so much freedom writing it, but I just have a strong feeling that writing my book will be the thing someone else needed to write theirs, or to start the business, or to send the email, or to put down the porn, like whatever it is. I just have a feeling that it's gonna change someone in the way that it changed me.
I'm sure it will.
Vulnerability has a way of doing
It's
that.
contagious.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is contagious. People are only willing to be as vulnerable as at least one person is willing to be.
Yeah.
And you're going to do that. You're a gift to the world. You'll continue to be that.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
How do we find you on social media?
Oh yeah, so I'm at the Jayla Jackson on
Okay.
everything. I do this type of work, and I have been doing this type of work since high school. My first time ever publicly talking about my essay story, I was the keynote speaker at the International Women's Convention. And I had no intentions of saying that, but God was like, hey, go ahead, say that.
How old were you when you did that?
I was 16.
Jeez,
I
good
was
for you.
16. So yeah, at the Jayla Jackson on everything. I love having discourse. I love doing this type of work. I'm always open to collaborating, no matter how big or small the platform. I don't care. Let's just, just be about the work. But I feel like when you're really about it, you don't care what it is.
Yeah, for sure. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Ooh, that's so hard. So I'm going to law school.
I in the back of my head, I'm like, this girl's got to go to law school.
Yeah, I'm going to law school, but I see a lane where I can practice law, but I also see myself probably getting a law degree and never really practicing.
You'll be more useful at not practicing law.
I see that.
I think
totally see
you
that.
going to law school will be great, and I think your best and highest use will be beyond practicing law. Maybe you can do it like pro bono, but
I just want to.
but who am I? I don't know. I'm a wannabe lawyer. I wish I was a lawyer.
I want to work in education, but I also want to do policy and advocacy. But I also want to do film and media, which I already do. I just want to do all the things, and I don't want to feel limited to one thing. I think when I hear that question, I don't think of a job.
Yeah.
I think of a state, and I want to be a force in God's army, and I want to be a resource ultimately.
You already are. You're just getting started.